Good morning, everybody, and happy Thursday. For those of you that are new, welcome. And for those of you returning, welcome back to another Torque and Thrust talk show. This week is episode number 17, Wings, Rails, and Wheels. My name is Bill. I have been an airline pilot for the past 7 years, hold 5 FAA type ratings, and currently fly the Boeing 737 for a major U.S. airline. My co-host is fellow co-founder of the Three Green Simulations Group, retired NYC EMT and flight sim extraordinaire Tommy D of Level Flight Simulations. On this episode today, we are going to be talking about the Boeing 777 and 787 updates, gaming news with GTA 6 updates and Active Sky, and a transportation accident with trains in Georgia. Then we'll be learning a little bit of industry terms with jargon in a jiffy, live listener Q&A, and our discussion this week, what is the future of passenger travel, wings, rails, or wheels? But more importantly, before we start off, Tommy D, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Bill. I'm doing quite well this morning. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Been up early. For some reason I can't get past 7 a.m. without having to wake up. So unfortunately, that's just my normal schedule this morning. So I've been up for a while getting everything set up as well for the show. One thing I did want to mention, I found out yesterday, and this was just doing some research. Every now and then, Tommy and I will get emails in our account emails from just random people trying to like build us websites and sponsor us and stuff. And a lot of times I don't really pay attention to them, but I did notice this one that said, "Hey, just as a heads up on Apple Podcasts, you were ranked like number 58 back in December." And I said, "No, there's no way." So I went and looked, and sure enough, I did 3 different websites that track podcast rankings, and sure enough, Torque and Thrust Talk Show, our podcast, in December of 2023 was number 58 for aviation out of like 200 plus. So I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but being top 100 aviation podcast is pretty significant for us. Now, since then, we've had different things like holidays and me moving and stuff like that. So we've kind of toppled down the list a little bit, but I am keeping an eye on that. Hopefully we rise back up to at least 58. But number 58 is where we peaked according to the online charts. So I think that's pretty good. I didn't realize we were doing that well because the stats and stuff on Spotify and other like Apple Podcasts weren't really indicating it. And I actually don't know what the parameters are per se. How they rank them. Is it like number of views, number of plays, or amount of episodes? I really don't know, but it was pretty cool. Isn't that pretty cool, Tommy, that we ranked
That's
number
actually
58
pretty
for a little while?
awesome. Yeah, I was
So,
at work last night, and for those of you that are new with us, that weren't with us before Bill's moving and us getting a bunch of stuff done, Bill and I are social friends as well. It's rare that we don't talk on a day. If we don't talk that day, we know each other's very busy that day.
yeah.
And he actually texted me at work, which made a pretty miserable day a little bit better. So,
I'm
and
gonna
I was like, yeah, all right, rock on. We could do this. So we'll be one by the end of the summer.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to at least get back up to, our goal right now is to get to 57. We were 58, so let's try working on 57. It helped me. It just helped me gain confidence in this show, because when we first did it, when I said, "Hey, let's do a podcast," I was like, "I have a format, but I don't know if it's gonna work, because it's like a mix between gaming nerds, transportation, but geeks basically is what our show entails." So I didn't know if it was gonna catch anywhere, but I guess it did. And I think a lot of our plays, because we obviously don't see that listener or viewership during live streams a lot of times, because we're having to do it in the middle of the week. But I think a lot of the listenership comes from our podcast when it's posted on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and stuff like that. So that is pretty cool. And also, if you just Google Torque and Thrust Talk Show, we're all over Google. I don't know if you've Googled us yet, Tommy. We're all over Google. We're the top result when you type in Torque and Thrust.
Really?
So yeah,
Didn't know that.
and I think it's because the show itself is such a unique name. Because remember, I told you when we were researching names, the original 3, me, Tommy, and Justin, we all originally were like brainstorming for names and stuff like that for the show, and Torque and Thrust won, but that's because there was no other show out there called Torque and Thrust. But if you Google Torque and Thrust Talk Show, we pop up immediately. We're right at the top. So that is also pretty cool, if I don't say so myself. I'm kind of tooting my own horn here, but it's. Did you look it up?
Yeah, so far I'm up to 15.
Yeah, we're
We're,
all.
we're in X. If you just Google the Talk and Thrust talk show, we're probably 22, 23 of the
Yep.
first.
Yep, and that's the power of Spotify podcasting is the RSS feed. So like I only really sent out our RSS feed to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Everything else is as a result of those platforms. So all those extra listings and stuff, I never personally listed. That's just how it's spreading. So good to know. Good to know that at least our show is people are enjoying our show because that's always the important part. We want people to enjoy the show. But without further ado, Tommy is going to start us off this week a little bit here because we kind of swap off back and forth. So Tommy's going to start off with a gaming update. And the gaming update's going to be, I believe you said it was GTA 6, right? GTA 6 and Active Sky?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will let you do that, Tommy. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. So, to those of you GTA fans, I got some exciting news. I was doing some research. If those of you that were with us back then, the hours after the trailer was released for GTA 6, we had showcased it on the show, like right in the very beginning, because Bill and I are very excited for this game to come out. Well, there's been some pretty good updates. First update, and this is just newly released. Rockstar Gaming developers are now back to working 5 days a week. Apparently, they were uh, working remote, and that was slowing down some of the development for the game as far as getting the initial coding and all that set. Because from what the article reads, they're not really using a blueprint of GTA 5. They went back to the drawing board. They're completely re engineering, remastering the game. It's going to be completely new, completely redone using all the latest modern technology because GTA 5 has been out for how long now? And the difference between the technology then to the technology now is probably astronomical. The first trailer is out. Uh, the GTA 6 leak that they had, if you remember, we had mentioned that a few months back, probably, I want, it was before my grandsons were born, but there was a leak and it took them um, a quite a while to get it out there. Something like 76 videos leaked of gameplay when actuality it was just turned out to be a disgruntled developer who no longer was in the employ that they went and took care of. So they were able to get that off. So to bring it up with the timeline, everything is progressing well. Um, they took a page out of Mr. Randazzo's book as far as secrecy, and they're not really putting a lot out. What they are saying though, it looks like they're going to have a big score with this game. They are definitely heading towards towards the direction of flight, the direction towards uh, a few shots of Vice City are in there, a few shots of San Andreas are in there. So it looks like this is going to be a conglomerate of all the games that they just redo. So that's actually very exciting news because if you're going to come across and be able to fly, like, because I know in some of the games you could fly um, in aircraft. I believe it's a Lear that you could fly through the airports. You could go from Vice City, which is in Florida, and then you could go up into California, San Andreas, and then back to another state. So if it's going to be that wide of an open map, I'm going to go upgrade from a 1 terabyte hold that I have for it up to 2 terabyte because that's going to be awesome. So that'll pretty much wrap it up for GTA 6. They didn't give any real developing news. Uh, they're being pretty secretive, which means that's going to be pretty wild. The next bit of gaming news that I have is finally. And for those of you who have X-Plane, don't ruin the surprise. But those of you who remember Active Sky back from the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2004 days, Active Sky is now under its final closed beta testing for release for Microsoft 2020. They do not, however, have the map work laid for 2024 when that gets released. Uh, for For those of you who don't know what Active Sky is, it's a weather generation program that works third party. You will need a small program which is called FSUIPC, which is a free download that is uh, a little bit later on today. I'll have it linked to it in the simulation tools in the Three Green Sim Group Discord. Uh, I had Active Sky back in the day, and Active Sky is just absolutely amazing. It's based on real world weather. It it depicts in the sim way better than the weather standard weather that comes with the simulator, and that's actually pretty accurate. This enhances it 1,000% better. Okay, it's not. You can choose and build your own weather layers, and you can make everything totally customizable, or you can just use it as live weather. And it's coming with screens where you'll see METARs for your departure, your arrival. You see en route flight. You will see pop ups. You will see those anvil clouds that top out at 50,000 feet, showing you where the thunderstorms are. Snow. It's going to make some changes to the graphics in the sim, but if let's say you're landing in Boston in the middle of December and they got a snowstorm going on, you'll actually see the natural snow naturally come across the runways and the taxiways. Uh, they were actually doing that back in the day. They did not confirm this, but the heavy prediction is because Active Sky does not use the Asobo coding, but when they release it, I will let everybody know. But the heavy prediction is once Active Sky goes live, and for those of you who purchase it and they have not released the price yet, they will work in conjunction with PMDG, Phoenix, Aerosoft, all the major aircraft developers, and you will be able to have a functioning weather radar in the aircraft, which that's just another level of immersion. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of miss that. I kind of miss seeing the storms on my MFD and all that other stuff. But one of the things they did release is they're going to have active air effects. You're going to have clear air turbulence, uh, updrafts, downdrafts, microbursts, the T storms, gusts, and variable winds. It's all going to be based and updating a little bit quicker on the sim than from there. But with that, everyone, that's an exciting time. I already put money aside for Active Sky because I promise you it will be in my sim.
How much did you? I don't know if you mentioned how much. How much is it going to cost? Is it a reasonable
They
price?
didn't put anything out, but I'm anticipating
Uh
about
oh.
$60.
Okay, that's actually not too bad. To
Nah,
get real world, does it do anything with the graphics though? Does it change the graphics engine? Because we were both talking like an American Truck Simulator, they have
there
better
is
weather graphics than Microsoft Flight Simulator.
your
Is it the
cloud
same?
layers are going to change.
Okay, so
So,
it'll
like,
actually look more realistic.
it'll look more realistic. So, if you're flying and you're coming over and you see the thunderstorm, that typical anvil
Hmm.
pop out,
Yeah.
it'll be depicted in the sim.
Okay, good. So it's an actual graphics engine. It's not just a live weather thing. Because I would say Microsoft Flight Simulator right now has live weather, but as we both experienced, it's not very good. I mean, it's accurate, but like the clouds are not a hundred
Right.
percent.
It's
Like,
not. They're not very very realistic. Like they made layers and they made them a lot puffier, if you will.
uh huh.
But it's not like really true. This is going to make it as true to life as they possibly can.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks, Tommy, for the update. That was our gaming update with GTA 6 and Active Sky. I almost said Aviation Sky, Active Sky. But now I'm going to take over and do some aviation news this morning. As per the usual, or maybe if you're not new to this, we usually talk about aviation history and news. So we'll always start off with aviation history. With This Week in Aviation History, we're talking on the April 16th, 1912. This is overseas in England and France, and I'll go over why it's overseas. But the first American woman pilot, Harriet Quimby, lands after a solo flight across the English Channel from Dover to Calais, France. Now, one thing, if you listen, a first American woman pilot lands after a solo flight across the English Channel. Some of you may be wondering why she's overseas. Well, this also happened with Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first black female aviator back in the 1920s as well. She started, I want to say she was born and raised either in Chicago or Dallas. I want to say Dallas. She moved to Chicago to try to get her license. This is Bessie Coleman. But because she was black and a woman, they didn't allow her to do flight training in the United States, so she had to go overseas. That's what happened with Harriet Quimby as well. Harriet Quimby, one of the reasons being she was a woman, wasn't allowed to do flight training here in the United States, so the only place that she could do flight training was overseas. So that's why it's kind of significant, because in 1912 and 1920s, they weren't allowing women to become pilots, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But that's just kind of interesting. That's something that caught my eye when I was reading the article about an American pilot, a first female American pilot soloing in Europe. I thought it was like, well, why isn't she doing it here? But that's the reason why. Now, for our aviation news, it's basically going to be a continuation of last week's what we talked about, because the big thing in the news right now, literally all over the place, is going to be the Boeing 787 whistleblower right now, which comes after the Boeing 737 scrutiny as well. So Boeing is getting a lot of scrutiny right now, and like I said, one of the biggest ones right now is the fact that we are dealing with now with the whistleblower on the 787 and the 777 program. So this comes from Simple Flying, an article written by Luke Bodell. So whistleblower reveals a Boeing culture of intimidation and shortcuts. The alarming practices like excessive force, and even noted in the article, they were talking about using up to 165 times the normal required force to put certain metal parts together, and also missing shimming, which is basically they're not marrying the parts or the metal fabricing together properly. Salafor is the name of the whistleblower, and Salafor, with former manager Ed Pearson of Boeing, FAA engineer Joe Jacobson, and safety consultant Sean Prochnicki, are to testify before the Senate. And I think at this time, this was written just before the Senate hearing, I think at this time they have already testified. And as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any substantial evidence presented yet against Boeing. But then again, it's a Senate hearing is not the same thing as a court hearing. The burden of proof is different. So I'm not entirely sure how that's working, because if, like, what level of evidence they would need to be able to take, government action against Boeing. Salafor, which is the whistleblower, are allegedly had I'll get to that in a second, but Boeing claims that safety allegations are false. So you got a whistleblower, and Boeing is saying that it's false. Now, Salafor, the whistleblower, is saying that he is facing discriminatory behavior from colleagues at work. One thing they said is allegedly had a bolt driven into the wheel of his car as a warning. So, and I'm going to bring Tommy in on this, because some of it is just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like some of it is like driving a bolt into the wheel of his car as a warning. Could he have driven over it? Yes. My two things here, and it's hard being it's a very delicate situation when you whistleblow on something as big as Boeing. So one side of it, and I mean, it's just like the airlines. If you see something, say something, right? That's how we keep the aviation industry safe. If you see something that's not right, that's unsafe, you have to mention it. You have to bring it up. Otherwise, it's going to allow to go until it becomes unsafe and people get killed, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, so that's one thing. If these unsafe practices are true, and Salafor is coming out and legitimately blowing the whistle, then good on him. I mean, that's the whole point. You got to be safe. You got to make sure that these aircraft that are designed to carry 150 plus passengers stay safe, because as soon as one of them goes down, one, Boeing's going to go down, but two, you don't want people being killed. That's the whole point. Aviation's not fun when people are getting killed, right? And not to mention that'll destroy the airline industry as a whole. But on the other hand, we're human beings. There might be an ulterior motive. I'm not saying that Salafor has one, but the fact that there wasn't substantial evidence presented at the Senate hearing necessarily, which once again is subjective, what substantial means, but concrete, it kind of makes me wonder if there's an ulterior motive. I honestly don't know, because there's always two sides of every story. He could be blowing the whistle, and Boeing could in fact be trying to suppress him, or Salafor may have some ulterior motive. I don't know what it would be, but ulterior motive against the whistleblowing. But either way, the FAA is doing the right thing and is investigating the claim, because regardless of the evidence that's presented, the FAA will do their own independent investigation to find their own evidence of lax or unsafe culture practices. What do you think, Tommy? I don't know, because we've had whistleblower culture has been more prominent in the past couple years, and
It has been. It has been. I'm a little bit concerned about the whistleblowers themselves. Why would you not appear with your substantial proof? Now, like you said, to your point, substantial is very subjective. It could
yeah, hmm,
literally be one document that
yeah,
they took out of any one of the Boeing facilities. I mean, because Boeing's just not in Seattle. They're in
yeah,
Utah. They're all over the place. So it could have just been one communication, right? And I'll cite the movie Aaron Brockovich.
yep,
You know, PG&E was brought down literally by one memo from back in the 60s. Is it possible? It absolutely is possible.
yeah.
My
Well, and the
concern
thing is,
is, where is your proof? I get it, and being a whistleblower, I agree, it is more prevalent, and in this instance, it will have a direct impact on the airline industry and saving lives
yep,
by you know taking care of a problem before that aircraft even leaves the maintenance hangar.
yeah.
But why would you not show up with it? Is there some sort of legal thing maybe we don't know about? Very, very cloudy to me. That's about as
Yeah.
clear as mud.
Yeah, and I just looked up an article from 17 hours ago from ABC News that was talking more because the article that I just presented from Simple Flying was prior, like just prior to the Senate hearing. And here's a quote from Salvatore. He says, "I have analyzed Boeing's own data to conclude that the company is taking manufacturing shortcuts on the 787 program that may significantly reduce the airplane's safety and the life cycle." Um, but I don't see any actual evidence. He said that he analyzed data, which I don't know what that means. Um, let's see. So I said that 98% of the gaps were supposed to have shims and didn't have shims. How? But where's this data? He said I literally saw people jumping on the pieces of airplanes to get them to align on the 777 production line. So I don't understand what data. It's almost like he is looking, because we both know there's a bias, right? When we're looking through data, when we want something to lean with what we're saying, right? And whether it's like somebody, maybe Boeing upset him about something, um but maybe he's looking through the data and is finding numbers, if that makes sense. Maybe that's why there's no substantial data, or substantial evidence, because the evidence already exists, but the way Salvatore is interpreting it is what's causing the whistleblowing. Maybe he saw something, because I've done it a million times, right? Where I'm sitting there going, "Oh well, like with Twitch, we talked about this with Twitch and like the Twitch affiliate formula. I've tried a million things. I've run the numbers on it. I've tried to figure out certain things, and it took me a year to figure out what I actually needed to do. Right? And Tommy can attest this. I've tried a million different things to get Twitch affiliate, and it only took me a month after figuring out the formula. So finding numbers and data to support your claim is a very real thing. So that's why I'm wondering if it's a ulterior motive type of deal, where it's Boeing did something to upset him, and therefore he is finding something in the data per se he can be like, "Oh, this isn't right." Um, but let's see. In response to, and like I said, there's a couple other people that were like Pearson, who is the former Ed Pearson is the executive director for the FAA, and a former Boeing manager testified um, that a whistleblower provided him with the records, that he then turned them over to the FBI. And this is a quote from Pearson. He says, "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is a criminal cover-up. Records do in fact exist. I know this because I personally passed them to the FBI." Pearson said that the records have been available for months, and he has not publicly produced the documents. An FBI Seattle spokesperson declined to comment to ABC News on Pearson's claim that he turned in Boeing records over to the FBI. So I really don't know. So what there is there's the whistleblowers saying we have evidence, and then the people who are supposedly supposed to have the evidence don't have the evidence, or at least are not willing to present them, if that makes sense. So it's like I feel like that should be a public record. And the another thing is the NTSB has not received any such documents from Boeing or any other entity as well. So it's like they're claiming that there's these documents and that there is hard evidence of this lax practices. But the problem with that is there's we're not seeing it as the public. Which I mean, we don't have to see them. It's not our trial, but it's one of those things. It's like why not show them in open court, or why are the government agencies not? You know what I mean? Like why are they not presenting this, or why is
Well,
it not readily available?
one of the things that pops to mind is, were the documents presented before the hearing for analysis by the government, by their analysis, right? So
Yeah,
think about it. You're not going to walk into a courtroom with a piece of paper and say, "Here's my proof of wrongdoing," and they're going to be like, "Oh, okay, great, thank you," and admit it
yeah,
as evidence.
yeah,
There's going to be a little bit look there. Also, they turned it over, so substantial evidence of wrongdoing that they turned over to the FBI. That struck me as kind of interesting. Like, I get it. If you want some sort of an investigation into something, sure, call the FBI. Why not?
yeah.
Um, why didn't the FBI, and probably for investigative reasons, but why doesn't the NTSB have those same documents? Why wouldn't you go directly to the NTSB? Because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're
hmm
going over to Boeing and they're saying hello pretty regularly.
Oh yeah, yeah, and
I
that's
mean,
and that's the thing is it's a severe. It's because normally in like an open and close whistleblower case is whistleblows has substantiated evidence, and then which leads to a prominent investigation or a thorough investigation and then findings. The misconnect here is you got multiple whistleblowers who are high up in the company, and it doesn't sound like Ed Pearson. It sounds like maybe Salaport gave him the data and once again was like, "This is what's happening." He goes, "Oh well, I don't want this." Pass the puck onto the FBI, right? And depending on when that happened, the FBI may not have warranted um, investigation. Now, I will point out, I hate to say this, the FBI does have a track record with, especially in aviation, with brushing off certain things, right? Or important things that may become a threat. I hate to say this, but 9/11, um, there was reports from the flight schools that the terrorists were training at that's saying, hey, these guys just left after they just want to know how to fly the airplane. They want to know how to take off and land. They reported them to the FBI, and the FBI goes, it's not a threat. It's not a threat. And then we had 9/11, the one of the greatest tragedies and not or yeah tragedies in the United States since Pearl Harbor. So the FBI does have a tendency to wave off or disregard things that may be important. So it's very when he says that the FBI has the documents and the FBI is like, no, we don't.
yeah,
It's very possible. It is very
it
possible that
is
they
very
did give him the
possible.
documents.
And all evidence to me right now indicates there's no ulterior motive. I
No,
may
I
I
don't
may
think.
have to eat crow 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, and I will publicly, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
this,
Something's just
I
not
I
seeming,
I
you
just
know.
sit right in the middle because if it is true that there is unsafe practices happening at Boeing, then Salapore is 100% in the right and is doing exactly what I would do and call them out on it because it's jeopardizing the safety of people, even if it is a misinterpretation of the numbers. Maybe he is interpreting, and that's why there's issues or blah blah blah. But if at any moment he thought that this was going to be an issue or causing safety issues and he came forward, he's in the right. Now, he did say he witnessed this over like 13 years or something like that. It probably should have come forward maybe a little bit sooner.
You would
Just
think,
saying.
especially when
But
they passed all those whistleblower laws where they now get federally protected for
yeah,
coming
well, see, and
forward
that's
with
another thing.
information.
He's not new to Boeing. Celeport has been with Boeing for like 13, I think 17 years, I think is what it said. So like that, some in the teens. So why now? That's another thing. It's why now? Is it now that because Boeing is getting a lot of scrutiny, now is the time to step up and say something? But why now versus back then?
Right.
Why? Because he mentioned, because like 777s have been around since 1997. So he said he witnessed that in his experience there at Boeing. So it's just like, why are you waiting? That's where it's. But like I said, I'm gonna sit in the middle. I'm a very black and white objective person. I want to see the evidence. And if Boeing is shortcutting and doing things that are unsafe, they need to be held accountable. But also, I would hope that the Senate and the investigative bodies are also doing a thorough investigation of the claims as well, to ensure that there isn't any misinterpretation of the motives of Salvatore, or the numbers as well. Because like I said, it could be a mistake. He may just be misinterpreting the numbers and such. But like I said, it's kind of a weird thing. As a whistleblower, if things are going wrong and it's for the safety of the traveling public, you need to say something. You need to step up and say something. But on the other hand, there's the intimidation factor, right? Especially if he is getting bolts driven into his vehicle and facing discriminatory behavior at Boeing, because obviously Boeing can't terminate him. But that doesn't mean, they can't exclude him from, people sitting with him at lunch and stuff like that. Or that's kind of a childish example, but a simple one. So that's also not fair. So I can understand the social aspect of becoming a whistleblower, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. This is definitely something that we're going to have up to date and continue to update you all as it goes along, because it has to do with one of the biggest aircraft manufacturers in the world, Boeing. So thank you, Tommy. I'll bring you back after this next one, because today I am handling transportation news. Normally we do like automotive, but the thing is this is a gaming and transportation and education type podcast as well. So we're trying to cover all bases. For those of you that follow me on Twitch or TikTok, you guys may have noticed that I now play Train Sim World 4. I've always been a train geek, but being able to operate one in a simulated environment is 10 times better. So today we're talking about transportation news versus automotive, because there wasn't really any automotive. But this article was sent to us by our moderator, Snowy, who's one of our Discord, TikTok, basically Tommy and I's technical moderators, what we call him. He helps us on all our channels. But he sent us this about an article about a train collision in Folkston, Georgia. The article is named 3 Injured as CSX Trains Collide in Folkston, Georgia, and this was as of April 15th, 2024. The current update says that all 3 crew members on the train, I believe it was one train that was operating and ran into another train that maybe was parked. It said it was a rock train. The CSX crew members have been taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries after an intermodal train struck a standing rock train, there we go, in Folkston. The railroad said in a statement this afternoon, the collision occurred at 1:24 p.m., and the 2 locomotives, 2 intermodal cars, and 2 rock cars derailed as a result, and a small fire resulted that has been extinguished with no hazardous materials. That's always the big one with train wrecks, is you don't want hazardous materials being spread out. As of right now, it does look like the NTSB is investigating that as well. Remember, the NTSB, although they're most known for investigating airline crashes, they do everything. So like Amtrak back a couple months ago had a derailment. I think it was a fatal one out somewhere I think towards the Rockies. The NTSB investigated that as well. So that is currently being investigated to see what the cause was, how a train was operating on a track with a parked train and ended up crashing, and why the operators of the moving train weren't aware that there was a parked rock train on the same rail. Because it's one thing to say, oh, why didn't they stop? Trains take miles to stop because they're super heavy, and not to mention it's metal on metal on the rails for them to stop. So it's not like our cars where we have brakes. It doesn't stop as easy. So, but we'll keep up to date on that. I plan to incorporate some more transportation news like that in here, so it's not just automotive, because week to week automotive, sometimes there's really good news, and then sometimes it's like, let's check out the new tires that Goodyear's coming out. It's not super exciting. But with that being said, we're going to start moving on to our favorite segment of the show, which is Jargon in a Jiffy. So for those of you that are new to the show, Jargon in the Jiffy is basically a word game that Tommy and I play. We take industry terms from Tommy's past career and current career, and my career as an airline pilot. We say it in a sentence, and it's up to the other host to guess what the word is. And the whole point of this is for you all to learn new terms about our industry, as well as kind of making our terminology and lingo not as intimidating for those people that aren't in our industry. So, Tommy, if you would like, you can go first.
All right, cool. Thanks. So my word this week is the thumper. So here's
Okay.
the sentence for it. Oh, I think we got a cardiac arrest. You want to go back and get the thumper out of the truck?
The thumper. Well, it's funny because in Call of Duty, that's what I call the grenade launcher. Is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thumper.
The booper gun?
The booper. So obviously it's not that. I don't think you guys carry that in your trucks, in your ambulances.
Oh no, we got to do paperwork if we get found with that. And then there's this whole
S-
arrest thing mess.
yeah. So thumper, cardiac patient. It makes me almost feel like it's um, like a machine that automatically does chest compressions.
It is.
Is
It
it
is.
really?
Yes, it is.
I didn't know those existed. That was a sheer guess.
Oh yeah, they've been around for quite a while. Technology just made them a lot better nowadays. But
Interesting.
yeah,
So
we
how does that
set it
work? Because
where we need it.
yeah,
There are two that the original ones came out were actually oxygen powered, and
that's
people, yeah, they were. We would actually have to hook a high pressure hose to our oxygen tanks. Now those tanks are 2,200 psi,
mm-hmm.
so and that machine would blow through them in about 4 minutes because you needed a
Wow.
certain force. You got to go like 2.5 inches down on the
Yeah.
average adult's chest to do a proper compression. But the
Yeah.
ones
So
now are being run by like, the Craftsman battery that goes into your drill gun, your screw gun at
yeah, I
home.
would say so. Okay, so you have a patient going into cardiac arrest, right? When would you use this? Is it to like when would you use that versus doing CPR and compressions all the way to the
CPR
hospital?
compressions are always first.
Okay.
So, we'll get the pads put on, we'll get them on the monitor, we'll get intubated IVs, start the medication process. If it's and this happens in more rural, but it does happen in cities as well where dude, we got backup for you, but like chill for about 20 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get them to you first available. And that one ambulance shows up and they got the thumper believe it or not, that saves the responders' backs. But if it's going to be a long cardiac arrest where you're transporting 15, 20, 30 minutes down the
Okay.
road, that's when you
So
would
it's
utilize
for
it.
longer cardiac arrests to like
Hmm.
longer transport from the where the patient is to somewhere where they can
Yeah.
like a
Also, if,
hospital.
if we're still in the living room and patients going back and forth in different rhythms, that
Mm-hmm.
are showing signs of life,
Yep.
when we pause it to look, we'll use it for that as well. Because I've been on cardiac arrests where we've been in the house over an hour.
Okay, so it's okay. So to answer my question, when is it used? So long
Any
term,
cardiac arrest
like
that's going to go longer than 25 minutes.
there we go. There's the answer that I was looking for. That's what I asked. That's pretty cool. I didn't think that was a thing. I always thought it was just manual compressions, to be completely honest. So
There's
the
usually only
thumper.
one ambulance in certain areas that carries it. It's a very expensive piece of equipment.
Do you see it
Very
more in rural
expensive.
areas? Thing where it's a
Hmm.
longer distance um to hospitals? Is that where you
Yeah.
normally see it? Okay. Well, there you go. I learned something new. I was like I said, that was a sheer guess on my part. But I didn't realize those existed. So that's cool. All right. Mine is obviously from the airline industry. So my jargon in a jiffy for today is cell call. Cell call. Before we enter non-radar, we have to test our aircraft's cell call function so we know whether or not we need to monitor the HF radio frequencies. Cell call.
Okay, so I know the cell call is you input it in the FMS. I'm not 100% sure if it's a radio signal or a beacon that sends out
In the
the
F
position of the aircraft when
in the
you're in
FMS,
like
are you,
that transatlantic non-controlled
yeah, when
off
we're using
radar.
HF. Yeah,
Yes.
non-radar. Orca.
But I do know it's normally a 4-digit code that goes with the aircraft on a transatlantic, transpacific flight. Um, It's not something that I very much use in the sim, but I have read about. But I do know it's a code. I do know it's used in non-radar tracked
Oh yeah,
areas.
because I said that in
Um,
the sentence.
I actually knew it before that, but I know it's SCLCAL. Um,
Cell
as
call.
yeah, as far as what it actually does, I'm not sure. I hazarding a guess
Okay.
saying that it's some sort of a beacon code that will transmit the location of the aircraft in non-radar control.
No, so transmitting the location of the aircraft's not possible in non-radar unless you have a satellite location. Like companies are
Okay.
able to ping us, but like non-radar, there's no way with an HF frequency that you could automatically send them our location unless you have CDLC, which is through a satellite. So HF, I mean, you're kind of right. So HF does come with a 4-digit. It's not a digit. It's four numerical. So there's 4 letters that goes with every airplane. All the 7.3s that I fly have it. And usually it's in your flight plan listed as you're going across. It's associated with the tail number. So cell call is a signaling method which can alert an individual aircraft that a ground station wishes to communicate with it. Cell call signals can be transmitted over either HF or VHF radios. So what that means is in the old days before cell call, you would have to listen to HF radio to hear them call you. And that is a really annoying thing. It's staticky and loud, right? This HF is old school radio waves. Cell call allows us to not have to monitor it because if like San Francisco radio or New York radio, when we're in non-radar, when we're in HF or class 2 airspace, they can send a signal via radio to the HF to our airplane, and we get on the 7.3. There's lights on our center pedestal that we get a ding do, and the light turns off. It says HF1, and we have one for each of the HF and VHF channels. It lets us know that air traffic control or Air Inc., the radio operators for HF, are trying to get a hold of us either on HF1 or HF2. So if when we first check in to oceanic airspace or ORCA, which is another term I'm not going to explain too much because I'm going to use that next week, but ORCA, one of the first things we do is we call them. We say, our estimate for this fix is this time, squawking this if we're over the waters route, request cell call check. And they'll send the signals and we'll get them and test them, and then we'll tell them cell call check okay. If the cell call does not check okay, then we have to monitor the HF radios the entire way, which sucks. So basically all it is a pager is what it is. So if ATC wants to get a hold of us, they can send us that code. And like I said, we get ding do. And then some of the jets like the CRJ, like SkyWest CRJs, you'll hear them go cell call. And so there's some of them have an audible thing. But basically you just look down and whichever light's illuminated, you switch to that radio and talk to that person.
So it's every aircraft. That was actually pretty cool. You stumped me pretty good on that one. But
Most aircraft, because like the regional jets that I flew at Envoy, we never went into like oceanic airspace or non-radar where we needed HF. There was no cell call on the aircraft that I flew at Envoy. So
but
the
every
first time I
ETOP
used
certified aircraft definitely has it.
not necessarily ETOPS, but yes. Yeah, so anything that's going over ETOPS is something completely separate, but anytime that a aircraft has an HF radio is what it is. If there's an HF radio, most likely there's going to be a cell call associated with it or a cell call system with it.
Okay, very, very cool. And by the way,
Yep.
don't use ETOPS in the future. I know what ETOPS is.
Oh, do you? Go
Extended
ahead.
twin over water engine.
Nope. Wait, overwater. Where's the E in there? There's only one E at the very
I put the E in
beginning.
there.
At the very beginning. What does ETOPS stand for? You kind of dug yourself with this one. Go ahead, Tommy. What's ETOPS?
So it's operations over. It's extended
No.
overwater operations to where the aircraft has to be certified to make sure it has enough fuel and the performance to go, say, San Francisco to Honolulu would be an ETOPS flight, wouldn't it?
You missed the T. What does ETOPS stand for? Because you said you knew what it stood for. So I'm letting you have this one. What does
Extended
ETOPS stand
twin?
for? Keep going. ETOPS. Extended
Extended
Twin Engine.
operations.
That's it. Yeah. Extended Twin Engine Operations.
You gotta remember, you almost had to wake me up today, so I'm still not firing on all 8 of my cylinders, and I should have kept my mouth shut.
I would
What
say
is
I'll
the
hold
P
you
and
to
the
it,
S?
Tommy. It's Ops. It's Extended Twin Engine Operations.
Operations.
Yeah.
See, there was an engine in there.
Yeah, but twin engine. You said operations engine something. It's like where's the rest of it coming from? Yeah, so ETOPS allows you to fly twin engine outside of a normal. So basically, outside of an hour flight or a certain range from a suitable airport. There's a list of things that the aircraft has to have working and like checks and stuff done to make it ETOPS possible. That is why we saw the end of the four engine era. That's why the 747 isn't being flown in the United States for any sort of airline, because with ETOPS, you don't need to spend the money on the fuel and the inefficiency of a four engine jet. That's why everything that goes overseas is two engine. That's why we can send 737s to the Azores and to Hawaii. So, and out to the islands, stuff like that. So, but good. Now we covered ETOPS. Oh, that was good, Tommy. All right, that was a good jargon and jiffy. Now, normally at this point, we would go to our next segment, which last week we talked about, which was Career Corner. Unfortunately, that has sunsetted. We're no longer doing Career Corner because Tommy and I, in 16 episodes, have taught you how to go from zero to hero to be a professional pilot or a medical professional like an EMT. If you want to know more about that, you'll have to go all the way back to episode number 1 of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show and go to usually about the 45-minute mark in each episode, and we talk step by step, progressively, how to get into our career fields. Now, Tom and I still have to discuss what we're replacing that with. Or not. There's a couple ideas out there, but until then, we won't have that segment up and running. We're just going to skip directly to our viewer Q&A, which is one of my favorites because we always get some interesting comments in here. I'll go ahead and pop this out over here. I don't know why it does that. I guess. Oh, there we go. There they are. So we got some good ones on here. No Clue VR on Twitch. Good morning. Airborne with Micah, hello. And then also, this is the first ever comment that I've ever gotten off of Kick for the show. The Torque and Thrust Talk Show is on Kick. And this is what they said. What are you yapping about? So obviously I didn't respond because I don't know when they sent it or what we were doing. But obviously not the best comment to respond to. So I just thought that was interesting to show here because we finally got one off Kick. But Tommy, do you have anything on your side?
Good morning, Micah. Good morning, Ashley. I don't think Ray is still in there. He was asking where the real airline pilots are during the intro. And I said the guy talking is
right here.
right there.
Use your
Ray,
ears.
Ray is someone who pops in from time to time on my TikTok channel. He's a DFW based 330 pilot.
Oh, I thought he was gonna be another scooter.
No, he's a pilot.
That's funny.
Sister Ashley is with us over there. Good morning, Ash. Wyland, hello, and Micah, hello. No actual questions or anything like that. Just the family's coming in and popping in and saying hello.
Okay.
Did you?
Well, just as
here's one. Ashley just popped one in.
Okay.
Do you plan on bringing other people onto the podcast? Ashley, we have lightly spoken about having guests in, and it's still developing because Bill and I we're competitive type people separately. With the podcast, we're ultra competitive because we combine efforts and we want to do it the best we possibly can. So we're actually going to sit and talk about it before invites go out to have someone come on to discuss their particular area of expertise.
Yeah, not only invites, we would love to have somebody else come on the show because in the beginning we had Justin, and Justin was a professional driver. He drove trucks for a living. I believe at the time when he started to, he was starting his own trucking company as well out in the Northeast.
He was researching it, yeah.
Yeah, and so he brought a lot of expertise into the transportation segment, which is what Tom and I covered now. So to say that, our takes in automotive news, while we're motorheads as much as we are geeks with aviation and gaming, the strong suit there, it's nowhere near as what Justin has brought to the table. So we would love to have somebody else on the show. Obviously, it's not going to be like TikTok Live where you just add somebody in and we don't know. It'll be more of a discussion and a trial trial basis just to see how they fit. We lost Justin from the show probably about episode 4. Or was it 4 or 5? Yeah. Episode 4, some really early on, due some personal issues that he was having, which, like I said, needless to say, it sent ripples through our community and through the podcast. But we do, there is a void that we're looking to fill, because Tommy and I, do good, but it'd be nice to have someone else on here, a third person. So if you are interested in joining the podcast, feel free to reach out to either Tommy and my business account is captainbillofficial@gmail.com, and Tommy is levelflightsimulations@gmail.com, or message us on Discord or TikTok. And if you're serious about doing this, about joining the podcast, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. And when I say serious, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on with creating this podcast that includes, getting to, on most days, right, Tommy, getting to sit down about an hour prior to the actual podcast. We go over, we brief on what's going to go on. There's a lot of research. Tommy and I have a document, and I have it right here in front of me, for our discussion topic. I spent like 3 hours this week researching stuff for the discussion topic. So it's not like where you just kind of jump in and wing it as we go along. We're looking for somebody who's going to take this very seriously, and bring that to the table like what Tommy and I do. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. We would absolutely love if you guys are interested to reach out to us. So
we're always looking to expand.
Yeah. With that being said, though, with
Ashley has another
Q&A,
question.
oh, go for it. Yeah, keep
Ashley
going.
is very, very intelligent. She comes up with good ones. So, Birdman, good morning. How are you, bud? Ashley would like to know, Bill, did you see any updates on the current layoff situation with Spirit?
I have not. Last week, actually, I can look it up. I believe last week, or the week before last, the initial number I saw was 250, and then I saw an article quote 500. So 500 could be total employees versus pilots, but as far as I know, I thought it was just. Sorry, I'm looking up on my iPad here. That it was just 260. But here, let me see if I can look up any. I just Googled it real quick, because that's something. Let's see, we'll do past week. This is from Airport Technology, and this is from April 9th. So 260 pilots. That's all, as of 6 days ago, it's 260 pilots. So the 500 number I saw may have well been the
total number of pilots and employees.
Employees, yeah, because what's going on right now, and the reason we haven't updated yet is because Boeing is more of a prominent news source or news thing right now. But because Spirit is having financial issues, the failed JetBlue merger, that's something we were talking about but it's a dynamic situation, so we really don't know. But as of right now, 260 pilots is what they're saying.
And Ashley says, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome, Ash. Thanks for the great questions. You're the first one on this podcast to ask two really good questions besides our moderators. But with that being said, I do have our QR code up here on the screen. If you want, you guys can join our 3 Green Simulations group. Discord is absolutely free, always will be free. It's the best way to get a hold of Tommy and I, whether it's DM or tagging us and stuff if you have questions, or if you're interested in being on the podcast, even if it's just for a show, you have something you want to present, you guys can reach out to us there. Now, I'm super excited for this. We are now moving on to our discussion topic for this week. It's going to be wings, rails, or wheels. Obviously, because of a very famous movie, I couldn't use the other one. Do you know which one I'm talking about, Tommy? Wings, rails, planes, trains, and automobiles. Yeah, we can't use that as a title. So the discussion topic and title of this episode this week is wings, rails, or wheels. What is the future of passenger travel in the United States? Now, I'm super excited about this because this has been a discussion amongst our moderators, amongst us. It's just there's so many different takes on what we think the future is going to be of travel. So I'm going to start off with Tommy. Tommy, what do you think is, because I have stats for everything. So, and actually to kind of compare stuff too, I did a simulated travel scenario from where I live to where you live. Like if I were to come out and see you, round trip for the 3 forms of transportation. And we'll talk about that at the end, just so we can get an idea. But for you, what do you think the future of travel is going to be?
Well, there's always going to be the interstate system, right? So wheels, just in the United States. I'm just going to keep it to the United States. There's always going to be the internet system. Internet. That's great English. Interstate system. Hang on, let me
Grab
fix
some of
that.
that coffee. Yeah, I was saying, let me grab some of that coffee before I start speaking. 'Cause
Mhm.
I'm gonna start doing the same thing.
Yeah, so everyone, I do
Uh,
apologize for being a little flighty today. I slept straight through my alarm, and,
yeah, it
Bill
showed up
actually
5
had to
minutes
kinda
before the
sorta be
show.
my alarm clock this morning.
Text him
It's
at
been a long,
5 minutes
long
before
week,
the show. Be like, Tommy,
but,
are you awake?
uh so we're always gonna have the interstate system. People are always gonna be driving, especially as long as my girlfriend is alive. There's always gonna be at least one car on the road because you've spoken to her and you know what it's like to get her on the plane, on an aircraft. I think we will always have a rail system in one way or another, whether it be the traditional rail that we see now that you sim with, like with Amtrak and all the other passenger carriers like Metro North locally over in New York. Um, Aircraft travel, I believe, is always gonna be around, but I will say it now. I said it in episode, I believe it was 3, when we spoke
Hmm.
about automation and it came up about an automated cockpit.
Yeah.
I That will be the end of me flying anywhere if I ever see that in my lifetime. I said it once
So,
and I'll say it again. I want
so
2 highly trained and proficient pilots in the cockpit of the aircraft.
drink
I
lots of
do not
coffee.
want it being flown by a computer at all. Why? Computers fail.
All right, before we get on a hard tangent of what we already discussed in episode 3, the question was, what do you think is going to be the future? So, of those three, you got planes, trains, and automobiles, or wheels, rails, and or wings, rails, and wheels. So we don't get copyrighted. What you personally, what do you think is going to be the future? So let's say you say it's airline, but you said because single pilot stuff is happening, right? It's going to
Mhm.
happen. So do you think that's going to happen to the effect where people are either going to go back to rail or driving? So my
Yes, I
of
think
those
so too.
three,
I think a huge number of the flying public might go back to rail or wheel.
so of those three, which one would you say in the future is going to be more prominent? So just if you could pick
Wheels,
one,
cars.
I think cars.
My very prominent gut tells me it's gonna be vehicles because let's face it, automation is here. It's not going
Hmm.
anywhere. I believe it needs to have a little bit more regulation. It can't be a free for all, you know,
Yeah.
but I think as we move towards a more automated future. Now, this might not happen in my lifetime because let's face it, I got you beat by a couple of decades. Um, there might be a time where it is 90% automation.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I just have a feeling though that like a lot of older, more hard school travelers, I'm just gonna deal with it. I'll drive it.
Have you ever
Instead
driven?
of a week, I'll take 2 weeks off and drive.
You know what's funny is they say that about like automated trains too. They're just people said that too, and now they're all over 'em. But
Yep.
I personally think, at least for my own job's sake, that from what I've witnessed at work, air travel will continue to reign supreme in the United States. And now that doesn't mean that air travel doesn't come with its problems. We both know they do because every
Mhm.
time I'm delayed, I'm texting you and my wife that about all the delays that I'm going to. But I do have stats because I love stats. I'm a nerd. U.S. Today surveyed 2,000 air travelers at the end of 2023. 30% of the polled travelers had flights delayed by more than 90 minutes, leading to the largest fear of traveling by air, which is delays or cancellations. Of those polled, so of the 2,000, 22% said the most difficult thing about air travel is navigating TSA and procedures. I'm a pilot, and I could tell you that's one of the most frustrating things about my job, too. All these mentioned items lead to more than 80% of travelers to change the way they plan air travel, and these changes include paying more attention to cancellation policies, planning further in advance for air travel, and travel insurance. So, air travel is efficient, but becoming challenging and expensive. Because if you think about it, the earlier you book out, there's a window. If you book out really far, um, you're gonna pay a lot of money because they know you need that flight, right? There's the demand, they have the supply, so they're gonna charge you through the nose for it. And then
Mhm.
about 60 days out, they're kind of in that we need to fill seats mode, right? So they lower the prices and it's a little bit cheaper. But then, excuse me, right at right before, like day before, night before, I've seen tickets go from like $2,200 down to $96. Like they vary so much. They're utilizing that last minute panic ticket buying that people do to get more money. So it is expensive if you're going to plan to do it more, more out, like what they're saying here, if you're planning further out. Now, you talked about rails, right? So we went wings, rails. Now, this is from CNN's Samantha DeLuia. It's talking about the rise and fall of the American train system. Traveling by rail reigned supreme in the 19th century before the Wright brothers even flew in 1903. The biggest rail marvel was the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. Then came the car and the newer, flashier form of transportation. In the 1920s, the U.S. government started promoting the building of state highways, like you said, because of the cars. And then the U.S. President at the time also pushed for a federal highway system, which we know as the interstates now, for nuclear defense. That was his argument for funding, is to be able to move troops and equipment for nuclear defense.
Okay.
Interesting. So that kind of killed the railroad environment, right? Because back in 1869, and I'll talk about this towards the end too, there was nothing really settled. It's the coasts were highly populated, and then it was kind of scattered in between. So it was relatively easy to lay a straight track through open land, right? Whether it was unowned or taken by eminent domain, and just have one train, a train company running back and forth. That was the quickest way to travel, because at the time there was no aviation. But then aviation is more efficient, right? It still is more efficient. It costs a little bit more, but it's more efficient. And then the cars, which I'll go into a little bit too, is a little more control. Let's talk about rail. So in the 1970s, Nixon signed the Rail Passenger Service Act, which stopped requiring private rail companies providing passenger service. So back in the day, in order to get government subsidiaries for the railroads, they had to provide passenger service. So if they wanted a handout or a loan from the government, that private rail company would have to also provide passenger service along their line. But in the 1970s, because they were failing so much, Nixon signed that and made it a thing that they didn't have to do it. In 1970, as well, the U.S. government created Amtrak. See, I didn't know this. I knew that the government helped with Amtrak, but Amtrak is a government agency. It is a federal
I didn't know that.
transportation service. Yep. So Amtrak was created by the government to keep basically rail travel alive. And according to the article, Amtrak serves 20 million passengers a year. I didn't realize that many people travel by rail. Since 1971, however, American towns and cities have lost access to passenger trains. In addition, prices on Amtrak are higher than European tickets and are nearly as expensive as some airline tickets. But Amtrak offers slower and lower standard service than any airline and European passenger train companies. So realistically, train travel most likely will never recover in the United States. The U.S. is a lot larger than most train-rich countries, like in Europe, right? Mm-hmm. You look at the United States compared to like Western Europe, where they have all sorts of rail travel. It's you can go to like across 6 different countries in a day, and for the United States, it takes you like a day just to get across halfway. You know what I mean? It's a big country. Infrastructure would be hard to update and lay due to the amount of private property that exists now all across the United States. Not as simple as laying a straight track across a largely untraveled, unsettled U.S. in 1869. Right. Like I said, I'm not saying that it wasn't occupied, because we all know that Native America, there was a lot of the trail tiers and all that stuff. We're not going to get into that. Some messed up times in our history. But at the time, the government was using eminent domain, because eminent domain basically means that they want a piece of land for public use and the government can take it as long as they go through the legal process, etc. Still exists today, not as prominent, but if you watch Yellowstone, that talks about eminent domain a lot. Good show.
A lot.
Yeah, it does. But so it's not easy nowadays, because there's a lot of private property and cities, like full-on cities between the Northeast and the coast and stuff. So having a high-speed transcontinental railway designed is harder, because you would have to navigate the legality of that as well. That's why in the Northeast, rail travel is more efficient, because that infrastructure already existed, because that's where our country started, was on the East Coast. Same thing with the West Coast. The West Coast, because of people went west and settled in California for all the gold and stuff. So there was already rail systems built into California for transporting gold and stuff like that. But in between, it's not going to happen. Now, so that was about rail travel. Now, the let's talk about cars, right? Wheels. So this comes from an article from the Vacationer, from Eric Jones, in April 2024. They let's see, he surveyed 1,066 adult Americans, and 75% of those Americans are planning to drive this summer for travel. Not rail, not flying. They're planning to travel. And to be completely honest, this might surprise some people. That's actually my preferred method of travel is driving. A lot of people assume I like to fly. I do like flying airplanes, but I commute, so I fly as a passenger every week. I see what could happen. Like, I would travel by air if I didn't have some place to be, basically. Like, for example, a cruise, right? For a cruise, I drove to my last cruise. Next year's cruise in Miami, I'm driving to it, because the amount of delays and stuff that happen that I witness as an airline pilot, it makes me really nervous about getting to my cruise destination on time, right? So for me, I'd rather drive. I like the control. It's actually cheaper, which I'll show in these scenarios. But overall, I just like driving a whole lot better. What about you, Tommy? What's your favorite if you had to choose?
Oh, I drive.
You drive. Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
100% I drive. I know your significant other would drive as well. She's made
oh
that
yeah,
very, very
yeah.
clear.
There's no getting her on an aircraft ever. But one of the reasons why, that aside, I mean that's the number one obvious reason. But that aside, um, when I missed episode one, right, because I
Mhm.
had to get to Georgia to deal with the issues that my father was having, right?
No.
You know, I could have flew down there effortlessly. Like I could have walked to my local airport and booked the ticket, put my card down, like, all right, give me the ticket, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
But one of the things, and my better half actually brought this up. We would have never have seen some of the things that we've seen unless we drove. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
we
a good point. Yeah.
we drove through the Shenandoah mountain valleys at sunrise. It was absolutely gorgeous,
Wow.
and like with the lakes, and I mean, we had a little bit of fog that definitely put us down to IFR conditions, but see, Ashley even agrees that the views driving are a lot nicer. And I'm one of those guys, like when I'm on vacation, I don't want to rush to have to get where I'm going. I'm on vacation, I'm going to chill. I rush the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Deadlines, school, work, blah, 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 blah.
And I'm the same way, just because, like I said, I think if I didn't commute every week or fly as a passenger every week to work, then it'd be a little bit different. But I do it
Yeah.
so often that even a 16, I did that once, drove 16 hours to go see my parents in El Paso when the flights weren't going to work out of my hometown. And I was just like, you know what, let's just drive. And my wife thought I was nuts. And I absolutely loved it. Same thing with going to Galveston this past March for our cruise vacation. I love driving down there. There's a relaxing bit of, or it's relaxing having a little bit more control about getting to somewhere,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely it is.
And I know for other people, flying is part of the magic. And I'm not saying it's not magical. It's just I do it so much that I don't really find myself enjoying it as much as I used to, if that makes
Where
sense.
you
And in
see,
terms of
I
flying
do
as a
it
passenger.
I do it a minuscule fraction as much as you do. No, and I'm still like, yeah, let's drive.
Yeah.
I could afford to
So.
fly, but let's drive. I mean, I have the the other factor to deal with, but to digress real quickly back to rail, have you
Mhm.
seen the article about an AI powered train that they're looking to use during the 2026 World Cup that goes New York to Chicago, 3.5 hours?
What? No. What the heck?
Yeah,
What
Ashley,
rail are
do me
they
a
going to be
favor. Can
using?
you post that article in Discord? That that was while you were talking
Well,
about rail. Ashley put that up.
yeah. What's the source though? Is
I
it
just asked her to put the source in Discord.
okay? Well, the thing is it doesn't matter how fast it goes. The main problem right now with rail is that it's mainly owned by private companies.
Hmm.
So that's why Amtrak is always delayed. So unless they're going to pay through the nose to keep that rail clear during the World Cup, um, it doesn't matter how fast the train's going to go. It's still going to be so inefficient. But while she's posting that, and I'll look at it later, that's something we could talk about more too about next week. But let's talk about the scenario, right? Because we talked about driving, we talked about flying, and we talked about train. So the big things, right, is how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost me? Right? It's generally the deciding factors when you're trying to figure out how you're going to travel, right? So this scenario simulates me going to see Tommy in Pennsylvania. Okay, and this is round trip, so everything is round trip because obviously I'm not just gonna go out there and stay. This is round trip for one person to go out and see Tommy. Okay, if I drove from my house to directly to where you live, Tommy, it's 2,209 miles round trip, which equates to about 33 hours, so about 16 and a half hours each way, which is not bad. I could do that.
No.
We drove to El Paso, and it was about 16 hours, so that's actually not bad. And using the fueleconomy.gov tool to be able to plan how much gas would cost for our car that we have, our SUV, $239.
Again,
Not
not
bad.
terrible.
Not terrible. So that is flying out there and back. Now, air travel. Okay. So air travel, I went and just Googled, trying to find the cheapest tickets. I didn't use any of my benefits. I was just Googling tickets to try to find the cheapest one. The cheapest one was $310 round trip. Not bad. Not bad.
No, not really.
10 hours of travel time. Now, keep in mind that's in the airplane and at the airport. That doesn't take into account getting up, getting ready, going to the airport, getting it through security. The 10 hours includes the time where you sit down on your first airplane and depart to when you arrive. So 10 hours, it could be a little bit more than that, but still about, I would say probably close to 16 hours. But 10 hours back round trip is actually not bad for $310. Then lastly, are you ready for this? So I did look up taking Amtrak to go see you, Tommy. And at first I was like, hey, this would actually be pretty cool. And I was talking to my wife about it. I'm like, let's look at this, because I've never traveled by train. So my wife has, but I've always wanted to do it just to say I've done it. After this, I'm not going to. Let's just put it that way. So first of all, there is no Amtrak station directly where you live.
No, it's
either
2 hours south of me.
Harrisburg, right, where you and I met up. So Harrisburg, either I could jump on a coach bus at the very end and go up to see you, or I was just figuring we get there and then we'd rent a car and go up there, right? Round trip, 6 trains, 70 hours of travel time.
Jesus.
It takes 30 hours to get out there one way, right? That's the same amount of time to drive round trip. And you ready for this? And this is mostly standard economy, right? Because a lot of the trains didn't offer, because there are 3 different trains both ways. Going out there, it's like about 3 hours, except for the last one's 5, and that offered business class. But going back, it was like 7 hours. I don't know why West was worse, but and I went in through and I selected the reasonable things. So like on the longer legs, like coming back, I would get like a roomette, something that has a bathroom or something and bed inside so we could rest. Calculating that all together, $1,800 round trip, 70 hours to do it. So
30 hours longer than my work week.
It is. And yeah, so looking at it, if you and I had we were going to do something at a certain time, driving for $239, not bad. And not to mention, I don't have to rent a car. I could go directly to you and not have to worry about renting a car up from Harrisburg to go see you. Air travel would be the most efficient. I think for $310 versus $239 for 10 hours of air travel, I think that's the most efficient. Now, it would be the only risk with that is delays, cancellations, renting a car, etc. So that kind of adds overall to the cost. But if you're looking just at travel in itself, air travel is actually not that bad. And then train travel is ridiculous. Come on, $1,800 for a 70-hour trip in mostly standard economy seats. And no meals. Right, that doesn't include anything on Amtrak. Amtrak is at least on an airline, I get peanuts and a drink. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, I figured that was a good way to be able to look at that and kind of see in a real world scenario which one would be more efficient. So I think air travel, once again, at least for my sake, will reign supreme for a while. And I think eventually people will go back to driving. Because trains, for what the service that they offer, as well as the price, it's just not worth it. And the infrastructure, it's definitely not worth it. So,
which is a shame too. It really is.
yeah.
I mean,
there's something
talk about a nice way to see the country.
Yeah, and there's something romantic about train travel. It's like old time travel. There's something, but if I couldn't relax on a standard economy seat for $1,800, knowing I could have been there. What is that? Okay, so that's 5 hours that way. I could have been there 65 hours sooner for cheaper.
Right.
That would kill me.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
100% kill me. So that, and for that reason, that is why I don't think train travel is actually ever going to come back. But with that, folks, that will conclude our episode number 17, Wings, Rails, or Wheels. We thank you for joining us and hope you all enjoyed the talk show. If you want to stay up to date with the show and industry news, follow us on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. The handle is at Torque in Thrust Talk Show. So Torque, the letter N, Thrust TS. If you'd like to save the show for on-the-go entertainment and news, follow and turn on notifications for our talk show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Feel free to follow us on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. I can do this. This will probably be better if everybody can see it. But feel free to follow us on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. I am at Captain Bill Official. Tommy D is at Level Flight Simulations. We're both on there. We stream regularly. My stream schedule is up there. Our next show will be April 25th.
25th.
Yeah, 25th.
Next Thursday.
Sorry, I forgot today. Yep, next Thursday at the same time, same place, 10 a.m. Central. 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So with that being said, on behalf of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, I am Bill.
I am Tommy.
And we will see you next week.